Welcome to the Ground Game Podcast. This is your host, Justin Piche.
This is Clay Hepler, and we are here to talk about how to win the ground game.
All right. So today we've got a lot of good topics to discuss. I think really valuable topics to discuss. So we are going to give a quick update on some quarterly goals. Clay's got a great team building tactics portion here where he's going to share some gold. And then our main topic here is how to build your dream business. And this is an exercise that I like to go through when I'm talking to a new coaching client or just really any land investor who's like, hey, I want to scale. Well, how do you do that? How do you figure out how you're going to build that dream business? And then Clay's got a sweet deal to review at the end that we can talk through. So why don't you kick it off, Clay? Give us a quick update on some pipeline revenue.
For sure.
goals.
And also, making sure that I'm 6 inches away from the mic today. For those people, I apologize. I've been told.
We are working out our video and audio issues and challenges. We're land investors. We're not podcast
Right.
producers,
I was like,
so
my wife was telling me like I was eating the mic in my first couple of episodes. She's like, just don't eat the mic. Okay. All right. So update on quarterly goals. So we ended up locking up about what I thought was, and we're going to go over this in a deal review, what I thought was 175K last week ended up only being 10K. Because of a deal that I'm not going to spoil. You got to listen to the end, but we quickly realized that it was not a deal that can be a profitable deal. We thought we were going to wholesale it, and I'll go through the whole story of how we got under contract, how we negotiated it, and why we're no longer pursuing it. So good solid week last week, definitely on track to hit our goals. I think we're at, for the month, I mean, I can look here. I think we're in the mid to high twos right now for the month of deals locked up in terms of profit. So definitely solid start to the quarter.
Yeah, man. Any update on your TC and the appendicitis?
Good memory, man. Yeah. So all is good. She's back at it and just absolutely crushing it. In addition to that, I know I've been trying to find a lead manager and upskill my SDR and my operations guy, and found another lead manager just absolutely blown away. And it's funny, we were talking about this before. She knew Justin. So she said, do you know Justin Piche in our interview? And she's like, my husband actually works with Justin. She said, I'm glad it's you and not Justin. I'm just kidding. Okay. No. So the lead manager found a really good one. And one thing that's important to note is that we have gone through so many applications for this position. We filled out 2 lead managers, and I have a really high standard, right, for our lead managers. They are our setters, and they have to be really good, ambitious, coachable, and aggressive, right? And someone that wants to learn and grow. And we went through about 200 applications, Justin, for two people.
Man, yeah.
And of course, we could have had, out of 10 of the 200, we could have extended the job offer. And we actually did with one of them. And the guy came in, and within 2 days, he said, hey, I can't, this is just not the place. And I think I talked about that last week. But we found another one, and we're training and really bringing them into our business, and I'm super excited for that. So everything is looking good there. And then the upskilling of the operations manager, he's killing it, already taking ownership of guiding and training the new lead managers because he's getting out of that position. And then the underwriter is a little bit slower because she is a SDR right now and doing a lot of outbound prospecting for us, which requires, as you know, a lot of their time. So we're going to be easing into that slowly last month and a half, but everything's good.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm glad to hear about the improvement in health. It's always tough. Let's see. For me, a couple of updates. Yeah, we sold a property on Monday from one of the big subdivides, which is great. I realized about $82K in gross profit on Monday. That brings us up to somewhere around 300 in gross profit realized so far this quarter. We have another 160 in gross profit closing this week. So 2 more from a different subdivide, and then a third owner finance deal. So I mean, it may be inaccurate to say we're going to realize all that gross profit this week. We'll get a good down payment, and we'll sell the mortgage here in the next maybe month or so, and actually close that one out. But yeah, so those are all good. I also just hired a US-based sales agent, commission only. She just accepted the offer this morning, so I'm super pumped about that. You know, I had some really, really good candidates. So you're talking about 200 candidates for your TC or for your lead manager. I posted a job on LinkedIn, and I've had a paid job running now for maybe like 2.5 months, and we have, I don't even know how many total applicants. The last time I looked about a month ago, it was like 180, and more have come in. And so it took a lot. I had my assistant really help kind of pare it down. I was really looking for maybe younger folks, people who weren't maybe as experienced, but were much hungrier and like had like a sales drive. I really wanted somebody who wanted to grow with the company and maybe wasn't nearly as established as somebody who has just a really long history working for certain types of companies, doing certain types of sales. And so I had some really good interviews. Man, it was like, I tell you what, choosing was so hard. And I think those are always the best. Those are always the best, right? When it's really easy, you're like, oh, there's one person that stands out. Those are great. You know, you feel good because you're like, okay, I have a really clear choice. But I actually prefer when I have a really hard choice because multiple candidates are so good. And that's how this one was. There was really 3 candidates that I had a really hard time choosing between. But I think what it really boiled down to is, you know, one of the candidates was maybe just more aligned with growing with the company as like a primary focus than the other ones. And that's really what I want. Because I want somebody who's like, who takes ownership. You know, you're talking about your upskilling your team, your team member there. And one of the biggest things is this person is taking ownership over the business. That's what I want, right? I want somebody who's going to come in and recognize the impact they can have and see the benefits for them for putting the effort in to scale my business and maybe not necessarily a different one or some other business. So I'm really excited about that. And maybe just another,
quick thing, man. So interesting. I think I want to just focus on this, Justin, because we all hear, hey, global talent is the way, right? You can get there to global talent. And even you and I 6 months ago, man, talking back and forth about my U.S. based people and your global talent, and you had brought someone on. What caused that change in you? What made you want to do that? And also, what's the structure of? You said they're commission only, that's a hard sale, right? A lot of people want draws.
Yeah, no, it is a hard sale.
So how are you structuring?
Yeah, I'll dive into that. That's a great question. You know, my sales team, my acquisitions team, they're really good. And like, this isn't by any stretch a knock on their capability. It's just that there's something about being born here, where you've raised here, and you're just in this economic climate. You just understand everything that's happening. There's an edge, right? It's just impossible for somebody who isn't living here and dealing with everything that we see on a daily basis to understand exactly how all the extra stresses that people have on their lives. They can, great salespeople from overseas, great talented salespeople can engage sellers. They can understand the motivation. They can empathize with the problems that they're having. But all of like the shared kind of national identity, domestic issues that still play on people's minds, those are not well understood. And it's really hard to get people to understand those. So there's always an advantage. That's one thing. The second is I really wanted somebody exceptionally skilled in sales to help up-level the rest of my team. You know, I recognize that not everybody on the team is an exceptional salesperson that needs to be, and I am not either. Like, you might be like the outstanding salesperson. My background isn't sales. Okay, my background is engineering. I was a submarine officer. I was a nuclear engineer. I worked for ExxonMobil, an oil company. Like that was my background. I'm tech-minded, I'm business-minded, I'm a personable person, but I'm not a killer sales closer, right? Like that's not my skill set. So I want somebody on the team that can help train the rest of the team, because they will recognize that by having the cold outreach team be better at handing off warmer leads to closers, that will help us close more deals. Like it's in their best interest to up level the rest of the team. And so that was another reason for it. But let me talk real quick about compensation and why I chose commission only. The thing that I wanted, the maybe characteristic that I wanted the most from somebody was somebody who was willing to bet on themselves. I wanted somebody who was so confident in their ability to get deals done that they were happy and willing to work commission only. That's the type of salesperson I wanted. That was actually kind of a disqualifier for me. It was somebody who was like, hey, I want a base and then I want some commission on top of it. I didn't say that was a disqualifier, but that was in my mind. It's like, I want somebody betting on themselves. The way I'm structuring it is a percentage of gross profits from the deal, but those can take a really long time to pay out. And so, somebody may have to work for 6 months before they get a penny, which is tough, right? That's a tough sell. So what I'm doing is I'm going to pay 25% of the projected gross profits upon acquisition. So let's say, Clay, you're my killer sales guy. You get a contract today. We close it in 60 days. The projected profit is $100K. Let's say your gross profit percentage is, let's just say it's 10%. You're going to get $2,500 upon close, and then you're going to have $7,500. We'll calculate the real number when it actually sells, and we realize the real gross profit at the end. But you're going to have this carrot that's out there. That's your money because you negotiated that deal when we sell it. But you'll still get some of it up front. Mm. The other thing I'm going to do is do a share of total gross profits for the company, kind of like a profit share. I do this with most of my team. So there'll be a percentage on a month-to-month basis that's based on the total sales of the company. And then the commission that they earn will be directly tied to the deals that they negotiate. But they'll get a piece of everything that the company does with that, and that incentivizes them to level up the rest of the team because that directly impacts their ability to earn that percentage of commission, and then they'll get another percentage commission on all the deals that they close. So there'll be a monthly recurring. There'll be some of it brought forward, and then there'll be a payout.
Right. I actually do that with my guys. I have a base though. So one other thing for that, I think that listeners would want to know is, do you have a graduated? You get this amount under profit or contract per quarter or close per quarter. Do you have a graduated commission rate, or do you have a flat commission rate?
Right now it's flat. That would be an interesting thing though, to incentivize even harder work is to I haven't done that yet. I think that the commission structure itself, it escalates linearly with the number of, the amount of gross profit that this person's able to get under contract and then us close and then sell. So that's interesting. Do you do graduated?
I do graduated based on a quarterly, like we do the base and then, 0 to 250, 6%, 250 to 350, it's 8, 350 to 5, it's 350 to 5, it's 10, something like that. I forget what it is. But definitely, if you make over $500,000 a quarter for the company, you're getting 10% of all those profits. They have a base too.
Yeah.
This is. I like the idea of the commission only and the way you do it, kind of pulling those profits forward. A lot of times, how people do that is actually just finance the property a little bit more, so they don't even have to come out of their own pocket. They just get financing from the financing company or whomever they're working with. Of hey, this is an additional $2,000.
Yeah, I have seen that. People who fund deals providing additional capital for the property at the acquisition. I've seen a couple of arrangements like that. So
that's a good way to do it if you don't have a lot of money. Bringing those types of quality salespeople into your organization. But they're going to want to. Anyone that's in this arrangement, by the way, guys, they're going to want to have at least $200K on the table, right? So you're not going to bring someone in, and it's going to be hard to find someone where you don't have it.
Oh yeah, man.
You don't have it. What?
No. I just said, oh yeah, man.
Right.
We have like a pipeline of more than 1,000 leads that all want to sell, that we want to buy, and we just couldn't quite get there on price for this person to literally go after day one. In terms of how much profit potential there is, like it's really not limited at this point.
Exactly. Anything else? Any update on your other quarterly goals?
That's all kind of update now. We're obviously working towards all of them. I have a weekly meeting, leadership team meeting, and so we haven't had it this week. We had it last Thursday, and that was a lot of it. Was, hey, let's go over these quarterly goals and let's talk through what steps have you taken, and if you haven't taken any, let's talk through what are those steps you should start taking, and what my expectations are. So I expect a good update this Thursday on that.
Awesome. Well, I want to go into our next section here, the team building tactics. Right, this is something we introduced first time last week, and I think that a lot of people are going to benefit from it because the team building tactics is actually how you build a business, right? You just have a high paying job. It's cool. Some people like to do it. You have a high paying job though if you are not learning how to scale and manage your people. And so this thing is ripped right out of Traction, which is EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. Those people that don't know, read the book. It is incredible, right? And I highly recommend learning how to implement EOS in your business. It is an operating system for small to mid-sized businesses, and it really just teaches you how to run your business, your meetings better, and how to cast a vision, a mission, to build a company that's worth hiring, that's worth joining, right, for your future hires. So the team building tactic this week is GWC. Okay, and so when we are hiring an employee, when we are putting an employee in a position, or if you go out and read Traction and you say, wow, there are some people that I hired because I was in a different mindset, a different leadership level, and really they're not the right people, but you just have that emotional feeling. A lot of entrepreneurs early on, they're just sort of making decisions out of emotion and not data. And so the way that we make decisions based on data when it comes to an emotional decision like people is we use GWC. Get it, want it, capacity to do it. Get it is simple. Does this person understand the position? Do they understand exactly what the outputs of the position are? Right? So if I'm a salesperson, do I understand that the outputs of the salesperson in this company, right? The salesperson at Scout Lane Group might be very different than the salesperson at Hepler Land Holdings. The objective is still the same. The output is still the same, but how we reach that is going to be different. And so our context, do they understand the outputs that they need? $150 a day, or an hour of talk time, or 2 hours of talk time, or X amount of qualifications per week, or whatever, X amount of offers per week. Whatever the output's in, do they really understand that, right? That's the core level. That's how we qualify people. Number 2, want it, okay? So my soon-to-be operations guy, salesperson, I want to clone this guy, 5, 6, I want to have 5 or 6 of them in my company. It's just incredible, right? I told him that. I said, John, you're amazing. I love you. You're just a top performer. You embody our core values. He's just an amazing contributor to our company. But he wants to move into the operations role. Now, he's a salesperson, Justin. He's been in sales for 10 years, but he no longer wants it. So if he's going to perform at his peak level if he doesn't want to do it?
Yeah,
right.
No.
Right. Exactly. So, you were talking about, hey, I'm hiring this salesperson because I'm not at my core level a sales guy, right? Now, you might be able to do sales, but it's probably not natural to you. Or you're probably just not, that's not your bent. And so you don't really want to do this. You want to hire someone else and have them come in and manage that, right? That's the want it of the GWC. And so you can look at your team members and say, does this person actually want to be in this position? Whether it's a cold caller, whether it's a data scrubber, whether it's a operations manager, whether it's an acquisitions person. And we sometimes say, hey, I'm just going to give this person this position. I'm just going to promote them to this position, or I'm going to change them laterally and put them in this position. And in reality, we're not really asking them if they want it. And what happens is 2, 3, 4 months down the road, when they're not performing to the level of the position, you blame it on them. When in the reality, it was on you for not understanding what they actually want as a professional, right? So that's number 2, want it. Get it, want it. Last one is capacity to do it. I've made this mistake so many times. I'll give you a perfect example. A couple of months ago, earlier this year, I had an executive assistant who was very, very talented, right? And I was super impressed with her. And I said, hey, I want you to be my personal executive assistant. I want you to also sort of blend, kind of be on the chief of staff role, doing some tech operations stuff. An executive assistant can do that depending on their capacity, right? You can have an administrative executive assistant that manages your calendar, your travel, your emails, but then you have a more high level, like a chief of staff operations person. They can kind of live in that world. I know you have one, Justin. But I said, I want you to, because you're so talented, I want you to be my executive assistant who manages my emails, my calendar, my admin stuff, personal financial stuff like that. I want you to also be a basically chief of staff role with operations, learning about Notion, building out Notion, those types of tasks, like more project-based tasks, more how do we consolidate and concentrate our resources in the right ways in our business? How do we build out infrastructures and systems so that we can position ourselves to scale? Those types of things those are not $5 an hour tasks like your emails. Those are 15, 25, even $100 an hour tasks depending on who you want to bring in. And I also wanted her to be a transaction coordinator, right? And so did she have the capacity to do all this stuff? Yeah, of course, right? She could do all this stuff, but not at the same time. Yeah. And so a lot of times we find entrepreneurs, me in general, we're like, oh, I can do that, right? Because we get a high or we get validation internally, Justin, from doing all the stuff. Okay, I'm calling a broker, and then I'm closing a deal, and then I'm sending an email, and then I'm calling a title company, and then I'm raising my capital, and then I'm ordering drones, right? And we're able to do all that stuff because we want to work 12 hours a day. And we can do it because we can sort of push ourselves through it, right? But at the end of the day, and our team members, it's not fair to them, right? And they're going to become disgruntled, and they're going to want to leave. And so capacity is not only in terms of the capacity of volume of tasks, right? In terms of the outputs of the position. Capacity is also, I can't expect a operations manager to make director or executive COO level decision making. And sometimes we put pressure on our employees, particularly if they're global talent, to make a decision that's not under the umbrella of their position, right? So we want someone to just make a decision on something that should be only made by the CEO, right? We only have the capacity to do that. And so that's another thing, Justin, I see, that when we say capacity, we're talking about volume of tasks, we're talking about outputs of tasks, but we're also talking about the level of intellect and understanding and context that's required to make some types of decisions.
Hey guys, this is Justin, co-host of the Ground Game Podcast. I'm interrupting your podcast here to remind you to subscribe, like, share with your friends, and especially if you're getting value here, please give us some comments and feedback. We really appreciate the comments where people are asking for us to discuss specific things. We want to dive into every topic that's valuable to you. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
So that was our team building tactics.
Man. Gold. You already said it. This is part of Gino Wickman, Traction, EOS. This is part of the system that you're supposed to do every single year is evaluate your employees. And this is honestly one of the hardest things, I think, for an entrepreneur to do, especially when you have good, loyal team members, but things change. And so maybe just a quick anecdote. As I was scaling my business, I hired a few folks for the business that I had at the time back in early 2022. And as things scaled, as transaction volume scaled, this is kind of a tale of two employees, right? As transaction volume scaled, I had a sales assistant who was a really, really nice guy, like someone who I really like personally really like. And I also had a transaction coordinator who is still with me and is my longest serving employee. And as sales volume started to go up, and we had to make a whole lot more listings. We had to do a lot more Facebook marketing. We had to have a lot more buyers list leads coming in, a lot more directed targeting buyers list ads and things that we were marketing campaigns that we were setting out to sell properties. The sales assistant just could not keep up. They could not keep up with the number of transactions. They couldn't keep up with the level of detail that was required. And so what ended up happening is my sales manager was just reworking all of these lower dollar, tasks that were supposed to be they were supposed to be completed, very efficiently, very just set it done type of listings, like very just, there's a process, there's a procedure, but things were missed day in and day out. And we ended up obviously having to let this person go because they had to get it, like they got it. They had to want it. They just didn't have the capacity to handle that number of things and still pay attention to the details that mattered. And on the other hand, my transaction coordinator has scaled from like 2 transactions a month to, in some months, 30 transactions or more on this, like if you combine acquisitions and sales, and has just crushed it, is continuing to crush it. She has to get it. She has to want it. She absolutely has the capacity to do it. And I think what people can fall into is, hey, maybe this person can't handle the role anymore, but I really like them and I'm just going to keep them in the role. And honestly, that's just not fair to you. It's not fair to them. And the biggest thing is it's not fair to the rest of your employees. Mm-hmm. If somebody is not able to execute on their job and it ends up hurting your other employees and you as the leader don't do something about it, that is an absolute failure on your part, right? You're going to hurt the morale of your team. And like, that's one of the reasons why you have to do this exercise. I think every year you have to have some way of evaluating your employees, especially on these 3 criteria, and having a way to either scale back their role, move them into something else, or let them go if it's not the right
and
fit.
if you're doing this simply, Justin, before you even start this, the key here is to make sure that there is clarity in all of the outputs of the position, right? Because what you also find or see people do is they get frustrated for the outputs of one of their team members, and in reality, it was their fault because they did not.
Yeah, they didn't set the expectations.
Clearly set expectations, outputs, responsibilities for the position, and that's so common. And it's very easy to blame global talent, right, for this is a low dollar an hour team member and it's just their intellect. It's like, no, man, it's actually your fault because you did not clearly define the outputs of the position. And that's one thing. Always look first at yourself. If there's a get it problem or a capacity problem, the want it, it's pretty simple, right? That's in the hands of the employee. But before over-indexing on this person doesn't get it or they don't have the capacity, look at yourself first in the context that you give them to achieve the task that you're giving them underneath the responsibilities of their position before you start to pull plugs.
Man, we could talk on this for another like 20 minutes. Let me say one more thing about it and then we can move on to the meat of the podcast, which is building your dream business. But I literally was having a conversation today with one of my coaching clients who has a cold caller who's not performing particularly well. And I think like he was saying, hey, like, what do I do? And my instinct is always to go with, did you set incredibly clear expectations for what this person was supposed to do? And if you can look introspectively at yourself and say, there may be some muddiness about what exactly I was expecting, then go back to that employee, set those expectations unbelievably clearly. Like, no question what the expectations are. Give them one more chance. And then if it's still not working, it's obviously time to let that person go. But I think, you've some great. I love this team building tactics section. This is great. All right, so now we are going to get into a topic that I think is super important for every person who's building any kind of business. But obviously, we're talking about land investment businesses to figure out, which is, where do you want to go? How do you even know what type of a team you should have? How do you know how much marketing to send out, who to hire? Those are really good questions. And I think it all starts, at least when I'm thinking about it, it starts with a number. Okay. And that number, it for a lot can be different for everybody, but usually this is my net take home number. This is how much money I want to take home in my business. And I think when you're building a business and you're obviously there's a whole lot of other purposes to do it. A lot of people start businesses for a variety of reasons. Your reason could be time, it could be whatever. But for the purposes of actually designing a business that produces a financial result, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So it starts with a number. What is your net profit that you want to take home at the end of the day? And so this is an exercise I go through with a lot of different coaching clients. And I think everybody should go home and take out a piece of paper if you haven't done this already and figure this out for yourself. But let's just use an example of, I want to take home $500,000 from my business over the course of the next year. Maybe that's a good starting point. I want to take home $500,000 out of my business over the next year. So how do you back into that number? Well, there's a couple of assumptions that you have to make, right? The first is, what's your margin on the gross profit that you have to make? So like, what's your revenue margin? What number would you use, Clay, on that?
Yeah.
I like to be conservative on this one, just because, especially when you're scaling, your OpEx tends to exceed what it would at steady state.
My gross profit margins are like 45 to 50.
Okay, good. Okay. I like to use 40 as a conservative number for people who are like planning this out. Obviously like there's so many factors that go into this, right? How effective is your team at negotiating? How good are you at lead management? How cheap do you do your marketing, right? Are you all mailers? Are you all cold calling, right? There's so many different factors that go into that. But if you use 40%, I think that's a good kind of rough number. So 40% margin on revenue brings you to $1,250,000 in gross profit.
Okay.
So if you're taking home $500K, that's what you're going to pay taxes on. You need to make gross profit wise $1.25 million in a year to realistically expect to take that home. All right. So the next question is, what is your average deal profit? Because you need to know, like, how many deals do you need to do in order to achieve that number? And so this is a really hard question, right? Because there's so many different types of deals that you can do. In my business, I like to target $25,000 to $30,000 average profit on a flip. Like, and when I say it, maybe a better way of saying that is, I try to only target properties that have a minimum of $25,000. And it just so happens that we often get properties that are worth less than we thought, or we make lower margins than we thought on them. And in the end, it averages out to somewhere around 30K for us. But if you're going to target 25K profit deals, let's just use that as a number. So that means you need to do 50 deals per year in order to hit 1.25 million in gross profit. That's the next question, right? Is how many contracts do you need? Because you're not gonna close all those contracts, right? I mean, you're gonna get contracts. You're gonna have title issues. You're gonna buy or get a property under contract with a wrong assumption about what it's worth. I mean, Clay's going to talk in the deal review about an issue on a deal, and I imagine it's going to fall into that category of, hey, we just made a wrong assumption, or there's something wrong with the property we're going to realize less profit than we thought, and we're not going to do that deal. We're going to cancel it. So, I think a really good operator closes somewhere between 75 and 80% of contracts. The less conservative you are, probably maybe close 2 out of every 3 contracts. If you're wholesaling, it's probably something a little bit even lower than that. But
I would say, for land, because of how many quitclaim deeds, how many sort of muddy titles, it's best to be 65%.
Yeah. And that's the number I have here, which is 2/3. So out of every 3 contracts you get, you're going to end up canceling 1 of them. That's a decent rule of thumb. It could be a little more, it could be a little less. None of this is exact. It's really, really dependent on many, many factors, but this is a good rule of thumb. So that means if you're going to do 50 deals a year, you need to get 75 contracts a year for properties that average about $25,000 gross profit at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. All right. That's 1.5 contracts per week. So now the question comes, how much marketing do you have to send to reasonably expect to close that many contract, or like to get that many properties under contract in a week? And I have some numbers that are true for my business. I'm going to use cold calling and I'm going to use mail as the two numbers that are true for my business and how much it costs for me to get a contract. This is incredibly varied. So like anybody who's listening, who's thinking, oh man, Justin's numbers are terrible or Justin's numbers are amazing, just keep in mind, there's a lot of factors that go into this. And here's some just general rules of thumb that I'm sure, and maybe Clay, you can.
Yeah, this is actually important. So just to expand upon that, right? It's like, Justin's saying, hey, there's so much variability in these numbers. Here's why. A cost to acquire a contract on a house flip or wholesale in San Diego County is going to be much higher than Little Rock, Arkansas, right? The profit's going to be there. It's going to be much higher. But I'm sure Justin's going to talk about this in a second. What actually matters in order to scale here, in order to get profitability, is your return on ad spend, which we'll talk about probably in this conversation. At least I'll make sure to add this at the end if Justin doesn't. But the type of properties that you're targeting dictates a lot of this. But we can kind of focus on middle market for these types of flips, and then we'll expand upon like lead to contract rate, contract to close, all that stuff.
Yeah, so the numbers I'm going to share are all in cost, inclusive of data, inclusive of skip tracing, inclusive of team labor. So the cost of my employees to actually pay them to work and get these contracts under contract. So this is not the numbers I'm going to give are not just necessarily return on ad spend, but return on total OpEx spend per contract. And just to kind of expand, obviously some rules of thumb, the cheaper the property, the more likely you are to get a contract with a given amount of marketing. Let me say that again. The cheaper the property, the lower dollar the property, the easier it is to get a contract for that property. And the main reason is because the seller has less options. A seller who has a property that's worth $250,000 can go to any realtor, and that realtor would be happy to take that listing because there's enough commission for that realtor to properly market, actually put some effort into it, to find a buyer and make good money. The same seller who has a $20,000 property does not necessarily have that option. Most realtors would not give that person the time of day because the commission they're going to earn on it is very low. It's very, very low, right? And so those people are much more motivated to sell to somebody who's coming in without realtors and is willing to pay cash or close relatively quickly than somebody who has a $250,000 property. And so as you target larger and larger tracts, like for me, it's basically 5 acres and up is the only things that I'm marketing to. And most of the markets that I'm in, that bottom level of 5 acres is probably around a $40,000 to $50,000 market value property. And then obviously on the high end, we are targeting properties that are worth millions of dollars. And those ones are really hard to get under contract with mail or cold calling, frankly, because those sellers are much more sophisticated. They have way more options for what they do with their land. And generally they don't need to sell or even desire to sell in a lot of cases. So for mail, let's start with cold calling because I always cold call before I mail. For cold calling, it costs me one contract, cost me about $2,400 to $2,500 in spend. So that's the systems, the phone numbers, skip tracing data, and the team who's actually doing the calling, their labor rate, $2,500 per contract. And then for mail, for me, it's up around $8,000 per contract is how much it costs for me to get a mail contract right now. And my main hypothesis for that is because I am only mailing at this point, to developable properties. I'm only mailing to potential subdivides and higher value tracts. I'm not mailing to it'd be hard. I don't think I'm mailing to anything that's worth less than maybe $150,000 to $200,000 at this point. And so those are much more sophisticated investors. They're not as likely to reach out to you if you send a mailer. They're much more likely to list with a broker. And then we also work the lists over, obviously, first with cold calling. I'm trying to get the cheapest way to get a lead before I go into a more expensive way to get a lead. And so a lot of what you might consider lower hanging fruit or folks that are more motivated to sell that answer the phone, we're already having those conversations before we even send a mailer to those people. Both of those are contributing factors to the mail cost being quite high relative to what a lot of people are doing. So what does that mean? Okay, you want 1.5 contracts per week? You're going to have to spend some money on on marketing spend and team spend to actually do that. Another little quick rule of thumb that I use is one cold caller, a good cold caller, can get one property under contract every 6 weeks. And that assumes a ton of things. Okay. It assumes that you have good lead flow processes, you have good follow-up, you have a good negotiator. Like the other part of the team that's actually taking, like your lead manager and your acquisitions manager team are working, and they're able to get those leads turned over into contracts. But that's the rule of thumb that I'm using when I'm targeting a certain number of contracts I want to get in a week. I have to scale my team to a certain size to get that. So 6 cold callers would result on average in 1 contract per week from that marketing channel. And maybe we'll just take a quick pause, Clay, for you to give some input. I can kind of round it up with, hey, what does your team have to look like to actually do that number of deals? But maybe just a quick talk on return on ad spend.
Yeah. What I do here is, if we're talking about actual numbers, right? If we're talking industry average, okay, for cold calling, you're going to close in the first 30 days of deals coming in your system about 1 out of every 50 to 60 leads. Okay, so this kind of aligns with what Justin's saying. Depending on how many leads you're submitting a day, let's just say you submit 2 leads per day per cold caller. Okay, so that means 2 leads times 5, that's 10. Hold on.
Times 6 is 60.
Right. Times 6 is.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 10.
So,
that'd be 60 leads in 6 weeks.
Math right now, going on afternoon recording session here. So we're about 10 leads a day, right? In that respect, let's say 6. If you have 6 cold callers, and you're going to do 12 leads per day. 12 leads per day times 5 days in a week. If your cold callers are calling 5 days, sometimes some people do 6 days, right? But if your cold callers are calling 5 days, this is Justin's number. I arrived at it differently. This is how land investors get to numbers differently, right? So that's 60 leads in a week, right? And so if I'm really good, I might be able to do 1 out of every 50 leads, right? And so that kind of gets closer to Justin's number of every 6 weeks. But if we're just talking out 1 out of every 60, this is exactly what Justin said, it's 1 lead per week per cold caller, right? And so if we just use that, if we're just doing cold calling, we're like, okay, so I can expect basically I have 6 cold callers. I can expect basically 4 to 5 deals per month, right? Essentially,
that's about right. Yep. And again, we talk about numbers, right? So Clay is saying, you can expect 1 out of every 60 leads when you're first starting, maybe to result in a contract. For us, it's more like 1 in 25 to 30. We just push less leads per cold caller because we do a lot of the qualification on that front end in that first call, which we kind of talked about in a different podcast. Whereas Clay's got lead managers, and they're doing a lot more of the maybe deeper qualification before it gets to acquisitions manager. So, I mean, there's a million ways to do this.
Right. And the reason why we do that, let me just kind of heads up, is we have people in our system now that have opted into communication. And so we can continue to market to them in a compliant way. And they're in our system for, like, Justin might have 25 people. They're more qualified. It's less strain on his system today. But I'm building up over a longer period of time. I might have more people. Now, these are philosophical differences. They could be right. They could be wrong. Right, but I like to have more people in my system because I trust my sales team, that's why we push more people through for retail leads, kind of retail leads, people that are motivated in selling. And then as it pertains to mail, right? If we're just talking about Justin's mail cost, right? He says $8,000. That's pretty expensive for mail, right? They're in the old days, right?
To be clear, that's inclusive of my acquisitions manager, lead manager, all of their time relative. That's like a proportional amount of time they spend on mail leads versus spending on cold calling, other lead sources. So that's not, I'm not sending, because that would be an equivalent of sending what, like 13,000 letters to 1 contract. That's not true. It's more like 8,000 to 9,000 is what I'm seeing right now, letters per contract. It's just the cost inclusive of labor and everything is about $8,000. My marketing cost is probably more like 4,500 or like 4,700. Right. So I know a lot of people look at those numbers differently. Just a little clarification there.
That's super important, right? So
that when you hear us talk about cost per lead, cost per deal, cost per contract, average profit, all these things, always ask yourself, like we just look at this one way, guys. You should run your business in a way that really, and this is what we're talking about, building your dream business, but running your business in a way that is conducive to your goals, your life. And this is just what we do. We're not saying this is the right way. We're just saying this is how we roll. And so for mail, you can say, okay, if I send out like 4,500 pieces of mail using kind of what Justin's doing, which is higher dollar properties, that's what I can expect. I find that people can really visualize that a little bit better, Justin, kind of those nitty gritty numbers. Yeah. And Justin has a sophisticated sales team. There's a lot of stuff that go into this, right? But that's kind of high level. So you can expect that if you have 6 cold callers, a deal a week. And if you send out 20,000 letters per month, let's just say, you can do 3 to 4 deals a month, right? So that'll get you to where you need to be.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to show like we're talking on this podcast. I've got for those who are looking at the YouTube, I've got a remarkable tablet, and I write this stuff out, and I'm showing a client, our coaching client, or talking to another land investor on a consulting call, and I'm talking through this type of stuff. It's a lot easier to visualize. And I totally recognize some of this may be lost on folks. I think the most important thing that anyone should take away from this is to start with the end in mind, figure out what that number is that you want to take home, and then work into what your operating budget should be, your marketing OpEx budget should be. And that'll help inform what your team structure should look like. And this business is so customizable. You may say, you know what? I don't want to cold call at all. All I want to do is mail. Okay, great. You probably don't need to use the number I use, which is 8,000 to 9,000 mailers. You maybe have better performance, 5,000, 6,000, somewhere in that range, depending on the types of property and the area that you're targeting. But figure what that number is and scale that marketing budget. Spend the money that you need to spend, get those mailers out, make sure they're good, make sure you're improving constantly to generate the number of contracts you need, to do the number of deals you need at the right price to hit your number. Like you've got to actually execute on the plan and figure out what that plan is. Otherwise, you're just throwing money in the dark. You don't know what the results of your business are going to be, and you're going to be frustrated because you're not going to have consistency. You're not going to have something you can hang your hat on. One of the things that my wife and I talk about all the time is hey, she wants to. Okay, we're going to cut that out. I don't want to talk about that. Okay, we'll go back a sec. One of the things my wife and I talk about all the time is how do we know this business is going to consistently produce income, right? Because every time she talks to me, I'm like, oh, I got these deals going and I got these deals selling. And then I'll go into a month of very high stress, sales maybe slows down. And then a month of jubilee when we get a bunch of, and it can be very up and down. But what I'm trying to do is design a business that is very consistent. And yeah, there's no way around the cyclical nature of this business. It's just no matter what, even at scale. Okay, guys, even doing 150 deals or whatever in a year, it still feels cyclical. Okay. But I want to have at least consistent enough deal flow through the months that I can predict good deal flow to be able to pull out a regular income from this business so that I'm not stressed every month of am I going to be able to pull out the money I need to pay my mortgage and feed my kids and go on vacation or whatever other things I want to do. Without proper planning and actually understanding what the results are supposed to be for the input that you're putting in, you're never going to feel that way. And I think that's a really challenging way to operate a business, is just feeling like you're constantly in the dark about what the results of it are going to be.
Right. And let's just set the right expectations here. Justin and I were talking about this before, and this is just so timely. Justin and I we came into this business in very different perspectives. Justin came with a lot of cash. I came with $30,000, if that, right? And I can tell you one thing: the way that Justin did it is better than the way that I did it, right? So this business, like Justin said, is a cyclical business, and we need to take the time frame of a quarter versus a month, right? Everyone says, I had this Twitter post that got a lot of impressions and people liking it because I'm like, first month, negative 60K. Second month, 30. Second month, 30. Second month, fourth month, 60. 323K. 500K. So all these cyclical natures of the business, and people want to say, hey, you're going to get 100K months. but what matters is the year. And so, being able to pull out that money in a way that's really, or building a business that's consistent, but consistent on a quarterly basis versus a monthly basis is what matters. So I just want to touch on two more things, Justin, as we're wrapping up here at the end of this section. Number one, return on ad spend. Okay, so Justin and I talk about, okay, it cost me $2,400 to get a cold call lead. So if you call me up, right, Justin does consulting, people call me all the time about it, or the Landman Accelerator, and they're asking me, hey, like, my cost to acquire a contract is actually $1,500. I said, wow, that's good. What's your normal gross profit? Well, it's usually about $3,000. This is a hypothetical example. That's bad. That's actually very, very bad. Because you can't run a business like that. You can't pay your employees, your commissions, your scale. You can't scale out of that. Where we need to be in any channel that we're doing, whether you're doing, you're doing cold calling or texting or RVMing or whatever you want to do in your business, that's your business. But you want to be between 3 to 5x return on ad spend, right? So that means you put $1 in, $3 come out, or you put $1 in, $5 come out. That is the recipe to scale. If you're going after one marketing channel, okay, and you're investing in this marketing channel, and you're like a 2.95x, and you're wondering why your business isn't scaling, you got to fix the problem of that marketing channel first to get it to over 3, or to 4. And that's either getting better on your front end with the actual leads. It's getting better in your lead intake process, but you can start to analyze your process and know that the 3 to 5x return on ad spend is where you need to be, or you're not scaling your business, right? You are not scaling your business. You're not scaling yourself out of your business. It doesn't matter. Justin could say $8,000, but he says, every contract I get in direct mail I'm making $50,000. So
Yeah. Exactly. Our mail contracts are higher profit on average by a good margin than our cold call contracts, just because we're targeting a different type of property. But that's what a good point. What a good point, man. You want to go run into the deal review?
Yeah.
Kind of been teasing from the beginning. I'd love to.
Yeah.
hear about
So
it.
last week, my acquisition guy was trying to close a guy on the phone, and I don't normally come in to close, but I love to do it. He couldn't close this guy. And this guy threw up all these objections. Hey, I'm not interested, whatever. I need to have my attorney look at it. I get on the call with this guy, walk him through the contract. I'm not going to go into details because we are running out of time here. But we go through the whole contract. I close him on the phone, okay? And I thought that this property was a great property. It was going to be a wholesale deal, right? This was in a state that's pretty northerly, though, so it was a little bit of a risk because it had a 3-season road that actually went to the property. And so we get this thing under contract. I eventually call a broker, right, after the fact. And we're thinking that, we're buying it for like $1,700 an acre, something like that. It's 80 acres. And we were like, we're going to sell this thing for $4,000 an acre. And we were super pumped, man. I was like, wow, this is going to be a killer deal. And it's going to be a really good contract for us in this quarter. So we called a broker, and a couple of things happened, right? So the broker said, hey, number one, this is a 3-season road, right? So your speed to sale is going to decrease dramatically because it is an ATV road. So access, this is a classic land investing, right? Access is so critical, right? So just because it has an easement, it looks like there's a dirt road that's a big road, until you get the local knowledge to know the accessibility of of your parcels, you don't really know where it's going to end up, right? Because that could swing a price dramatically. Justin, he also said there is no electricity to this lot, even though the seller told us there was electricity to the lot. And he said, in this county, for some reason, 80 acres individually will sell for $2,000 to $2,500 an acre. A 40 acre though will sell for $5,000 an acre. And
Wow.
so that's bizarre. Again, local knowledge, this stuff happens all the time, especially if you're jumping into different markets, as most land investors do, right? And so,
It means they're priced the same. I mean, like an 80 acre and a 40 acre are like
exactly.
the same price.
Exactly. And so, or even more, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
even more
That's
expensive.
bizarre.
So we talk about the electricity. So basically, this parcel turned from what we believe to be a recreational hunting property to a pasture and forest, right? Unless you get a generator out there, which is expensive. We got another thing that went against us, which is the road that was a 3-season road. And so now we're going into wintertime. This is October, November, December, January, February, March. Not going to have access to it. So 5 months of cost of capital, eroding profit. Like I said, the electricity, which is going to dramatically impact our value. And so those two things, because of a local knowledge, killed our deal like instantaneously. Okay. And so the question always is for land investors is, do I get this information before I close or after? Does it help me before or after? And I know, Justin, you're kind of an after guy, and I've become more of an after guy, right? Because these are
You mean after
contract
contract
is
is
closed,
signed?
we talk to a broker. It basically what we do is we now have learned from this, right? That these things are important, and we kind of screwed up that underwriting. We're going to go back to the seller, try to negotiate it. Probably not going to work, right? You always got to give it a try. But then what we'll do is I'll go in there, I'll take a Loom video, I'll explain these are all the reasons why this specific property, we had to drop out of this property, and then we upload it into our own database internally. And so when we train new acquisition people, we have that information so that they can refer back to it as they continue to learn and develop and learn how to underwrite, right? So I learned something there. I shouldn't have approved it, but this is all these failures that we just take them and we learn from them.
I love that. I mean, I actually had maybe not quite as similar, but something kind of similar happened. And I know, again, you said we're running out of time, but we don't want to make this podcast so long that people don't listen to the whole thing. But I had a kind of similar deal happen where I had a property in Alabama, subdivide opportunity that I offered $150,000 for, 68 acres. It was a good deal. At 150, I think it just worked. And the seller wouldn't go for it. And so they wanted 225 minimum. I kind of cut it up a different way and made a judgment call that I could get that many lots out of it. It was kind of sloped. I had questions about the buildability of some of the lots. I had questions about the access off of the dirt road or the county kind of gravel road that was fronting the property. But I had sold some property in that region before, similar style. I thought I could kind of get close with some leverage on the numbers to get a 100% return on cash on this property. And so we got under contract. I was very concerned from the beginning. And so I immediately got a broker, one that we've worked with on a couple deals out there. I got my drone pilot out there. We got videos, photos of the road frontage. And then I had the realtor go and take a photo in front of like the center point of every proposed lot and tell me how big the berms were and how big everything, because that was my big concern, is how much money do I have to put into each of these access points to actually create a place where somebody can drive onto. And turns out there's only I had about 9 lots there. There's only about 6 spots where it really makes sense to do that. And the price, basically my $150K underwriting was correct. 225 was nowhere even close to what we could pay for the property. And we were basically one day before due diligence expired, so we canceled the contract. The sellers came back to us and countered after we canceled the contract and said, hey, would we come back at 170K? And I told my acquisitions manager, no, like I literally cannot pay a penny over 150 and that is it. And like, I'm okay to walk away from this deal. 150 is the most, but I guess they are motivated to sell. So they came back and they accepted the 150.
I've never heard of that.
Which doesn't, I know it usually doesn't happen. It usually doesn't happen. And this won't be like a slam dunk. Okay. This is not a slam dunk deal. This is we'll use bank leverage. It'll be about a 90K total investment with about 100K return. 90K investment, 100K return. But I'm going to create 6 lots, right? I'm going to have to sell it as inventory. We're going to hold this deal for probably 8 months. A lot of them are going to be owner finance sales. So like, it sounds great, but it's work. I mean, that's why this is like a business. It's not always just a quick flip type thing. Sometimes, we're going to generate some notes. We're going to sell those notes. And we'll probably end up netting out probably somewhere just south of 90% return on cash, which is okay. That's a solid, what I would call a double.
Yeah. If you need me to take any of those doubles off your hand, I'm happy to.
Oh man, but it's gonna take a lot of work. It's gonna take a lot of work for the sales team, a lot of coordination for clearing work, and there's still a lot of unknowns. That's the kind of the big thing is like I can underwrite 6 ways to Tuesday, and I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss something. I try to be really conservative. I try to get hard quotes. So we're still in the hard quote phase right now of getting actual quotes for people to go out and improve to make sure I'm not like wildly off with my estimates on clearing work. I'm usually not really off. I've done enough of these now to have a good idea of what it's going to cost, but you never know. You never know.
That's right. Dude, thanks for that little ad there. I appreciate it. Guys, if you've gotten any benefit to the podcast, of listening to the podcast, please, the gentleman's agreement is this. We're not adding any ads here, but we really appreciate when people give us feedback. Someone actually, I saw gave us feedback on KPIs. So we're actually going to be going into KPIs here in a couple of weeks. And we take those reviews seriously. And the ones that we really want to talk about and discuss are the ones that when people give us 5-star reviews, and specifically they mention the reason why they gave the 5-star reviews because my section was incredible. Justin's pointing at himself. He's pointing at himself. You're looking good there, But, those are the ones that I'll make sure that they get to the top of the pile. They'll get to the top of the pile. But yeah, gentleman's agreement here is like, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends for the other land investors. If you're looking to take your business that is maybe puttering along, right? You took a guru course and you're looking to take your business to the next level and have consistent, predictable profits. That's what we're doing this for. So again, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends. And until next week, Justin, you got anything to add?
I don't. This was a great episode.
Beautiful. Signing off, guys. We'll see you next week.